Guru Nation, welcome to video number 7,163 of 1,465,374 part series, I believe. But who's keeping track? Why we are in the golden era of sites. I think the next decade is the golden era. I think everyone's efforts, if you have any prospects of working with sites, starting a site, building tech for sites, this video is especially for you. This podcast is especially for you if you're listening. So it's about why software is killing clinical sites and how to fix it now. There's some sites are taking this on themselves. I interviewed this AI company that basically bought a site. Tilda AI is the name of the company. They bought the site, they used the site as proof of concept for their AI. They sold the site and now they are selling the tech to sites. And I've had the founder on the show. And very fascinating company, interesting guy. He has a biotech background and he got in the trenches being a coordinator. I think this is where huge unlocks happen. And I think sites are taking it upon themselves, especially the bigger sites. They're building their own technology when they're not happy with the status quo. My somewhat shameless plug, I'm a co-founder of Patient Ace, and Patient Ace is really the genius behind my business partner, Ronick. Ronick created Patient Ace because he was upset that there was not a simple, cost-effective turnkey solution for sites, site-centric, not sponsor-centric, but site-centric patient recruitment tool. So he built it. And Yuma Clinical Trials, my site, was one of the first like 10 sites to use it, maybe even the first five sites to use it. And Ronick, myself, and Chris decided, hey, you know what? Let's bring this to the masses. Let's partner up and let's really build this thing. I think sites need it. And so if you're a site needing patient recruitment, cost effective, built for sites and making running ads easier for sites for patient recruitment, reach out to me, Patient Ace, and I'll connect you with Ironic or the appropriate person at the company. Now, every clinical trial site was told tech will make your life easier, but instead it made it unbearable. The broken promise of clinical trial software. So, in theory, yes, tech is faster trials, less paperwork, more patience. In reality, software is fragmented, sponsor driven, and disconnected from site workflows. So, sites use, on average, this came out in a report, 20 plus different software tools per study. I was a advisor for Versatrial before they sold. All they did was help sites bookmark, like for each study, all their portals. This is your portal for this IRT. This is your portal for your recruitment. This is your portal for the study hub. This is the link for when you have questions from the sponsors to EPIP. This is the lab. This is the IRB. This is the e-consent. This is the diary. I mean, it just does not end. And that was a startup created to help organize this chaos. And they did very well. And now I believe it's owned by Florence and 20 plus tools. And when the tool, everything's fine, but when the tools don't work right, when the tools don't do what they're supposed to do, when there's a glitch, which happened a lot, you're left with like paper never had glitches. And I'm not advocating for paper being better because we use tech. We use Creo at my site. We use Patient Ace, like I've discussed. We use Inato. We use Monday.com now, which is like a project management type of tool. But these things are not always site centric, right? And especially when they're made by CROs for sponsors, which is what a lot of the tech was early on. A CRO making a tool primarily for sponsors that they would mandate sites use. And coordinators are forced to become password managers, IT help desks to patients, tech trainers to PIs, sub-Is, patients. I remember when I was still coordinating just a few years ago, patients would come in, I would have to teach them how to enter their diaries on their app, on the clunky app, clunky CRO designed app. And the CRO is in the business of not making sites happy, but making money. And so they would design crappy software, just good enough to where it worked, but not good enough to where coordinators like using it or even that they're happy using it. Just good enough to where it does the job. Sponsors pay them, they charge a premium, and boom, that's a delta they have, the difference between their cost and their profit that they get to keep, they get to pocket. And that for a decade this was going on. Around end of COVID, very recently, just maybe 2 years ago, we started seeing more site-centric tech, and it's harder to sell to sites because sites are stingier. Sponsors are not stingy. This whole industry wouldn't exist without sponsors. That's literally their name in this context. So it's not surprising that the great business model for tech was sell to the sponsors. The sites don't get a say in it anyways, and just give them all this stuff. Well, it's no surprise 67% of sites say sponsor tech is more burdensome now than 5 years ago. So we're in the tail end of the lagging indicator of what the mess that we're just coming out of. 17, according to this report, 17 and a half hours a month per coordinator spent just on learning or troubleshooting the software. 17 and a half hours per month per coordinator. Now, a normal work week is 40 hours a week. So 40 times 4, that's 160 hours a week. That's more than 10% of the coordinator's work week, work month. More than 10% of the coordinator's time is spent learning or troubleshooting software. And that's not spending time with patients. That's literally figuring out how to make organization out of this chaos. Each new study may bring a new e-consent, a different EDC, a separate training portal, another CTMS. Here's a link to send invoices to these guys. It's just crazy. And tech burden is cited as one of the top three contributors to coordinator burnout and staff turnover. Sponsor-centric software is the root cause. This was the CRO saw this as a honeypot. They saw this as a honeypot right after the great financial crisis of '09. When the money started flowing back into this industry, CROs were like, listen, we gotta, sponsors expect digital now, everything E. And you got the e-thingies. E-thingies was like a thing. And e-COA and e-everything. And then they got into decentralized trials right before COVID with more e-thingies. Sometimes these CROs are just creating stuff for the sake of doing it because that's kind of where they think the industry is going. And in a self-recursive kind of way, because everyone's doing it, everyone thinks that's the trend. So then everyone has to have a e-COA. Now we have to have an e-diary. Now we have to have e-everything. And that's fine. Sponsors are willing to pay for it. Pay, pay, pay. But ultimately, these things never were tested for like, do they actually work well? Do the coordinators like this? Is this making their lives easier? Is it making the data integrity better? Like, the questions to those two things are objectively no. And so it's not until we start looking at site-centric tools, and I think the good part about tech is ultimately it's a deflationary force. So the more ubiquitous these things become, and especially now we're seeing it with AI and stuff like that. The more ubiquitous these things become, the cheaper they get, and ideally the better they get with more competition. But early on, in that first decade, it was just a straight up money grab, and sites were on the wrong end of that deal, just like almost always. But fear not, sites, because now we're entering, like I said, the golden era of sites, and site networks are coming together, and sites started doing it themselves. Bring your own tech. And sponsors were okay with that because they're aware of these problems. So bring your own tech. What is your own tech stack? Like I said, mine is Creo. Shout out to them being a sponsor. Inato. Shout out to them being a sponsor. Patient Ace. Shout out to my boy Ronick. That's our startup. And Monday. Shout out to nobody but Monday.com. Uh, it helps with the workflow at the site. Those things start to integrate too. Like little by little, you're going to be able to start integrating. Patient Ace can already integrate with Creo. Monday, I believe, can integrate with a lot of office workspaces and emails and calendars and things like that. So we're starting to get more compatibility amongst these tools. Creo is also working on things like automatic data entry. So they have their Creo EDC side for the sponsors. It's less work for the sites. Things are getting more site-centric. And sponsor-centric software is still around. It's decreasing in popularity. And especially as the site networks get bigger, more private equity comes in. You're starting to get more coordinator workflow efficiency, the integration I discussed, the electronic health records compatibility. It's starting to work nicely. And Creo has this thing where you can actually request medical records from a subject once they sign a consent, and it automatically pops up in your source within minutes. It's amazing. Their tools are starting to come out. And now, like the ones that still suck are the patient-facing tools, but I know there's vendors working on these things as well. And from a perspective of, hey, yes, these are e-diaries we got to give to patients, but to use the example of Brad Hightower's famous speech at a conference where he brought a bunch of patient reported diaries. He had a stack of tablets. By the end of his speech, the tablets were stacked up. He couldn't even see because they were so many. This is like what a typical site deals with for like one study. And they're clunky and they don't work. So now vendors are starting to fix those things too because they understand not only is it better for the patient to have something that works smoothly, but the sites are the ones that ultimately manage that stuff and have to retrain the patients when they're not compliant. And it makes sense to have easier user experience or better user experiences. So software bloat is kind of ending, but there's still plenty of opportunities here if you're a site network and if you're a tech vendor as well. DCT, decentralized clinical trials, remember that? They made it even worse. They started adding telehealth, remote assessments, wearables, integrating with the data, shipping and concierge logistics. Now sites are coordinating external vendors and third-party systems they don't control. It sucks. I know this is not really tech related, but we use vendors, various imaging vendors for our studies, and they have their own tech and they have their own logins, and we have to ultimately manage these things for them as well. So these are things that coordinators really shouldn't be doing, but have to do. And then sites have to bear the brunt of all this and the burden of all this. So instead of simplifying the workflows like Monday does for us, Monday.com, DCT's created a tech stack explosion, and sponsors offload complexity to sites without investing in site readiness or training. They just give you all the stuff and say, here, go figure it out. Good luck when the patient comes. And so what sites actually want? One unified platform that includes CTMS, eReg, eSource, EHR integration, and patient recruitment and engagement tools. That stack right there is what I mentioned. For me, it's Creo, Monday, and Patient Ace. For me, thorough on business development with Anato. That's our tech stack for now. Sites don't want a vendor marketplace. We want a dashboard for our operations. One place, one login. Here's what we do. Viva Site Vault actually have made some strides in this regard as well. And then AI is really the next thing. And I think AI is where things get interesting because like I said, Tilda, I've had the CEO on before, but like shout out to some of the CROs doing this stuff too. IQVIA's One Home for Sites. They're trying to corner the market and they're one of the CROs that are leading that initiative, and hats off to them. But the power dynamics being shifted, and it's being shifted to the site networks. And this is why I say we are in the golden era of sites because what used to be sponsor-centric tech is now turning into site-centric tech and site network-centric tech. So the tech's not broken. It was pointed in the wrong direction. It's starting to be pointed in the right direction. Sponsors are optimizing for this now. But the battle of this is all happening at the coordinator's desk. And they're the ones that no one ever discusses things with. So if you're a site auditor, or sorry, if you're a site owner, start auditing your tech burden. Just look at all the tools. What do you have? Figure out a way to consolidate your vendors. Figure out the tech stack that works for you. Push back on sponsor required platforms that slow you down. And then if you're a tech founder, don't build for the CRO or sponsor anymore. That ship has sailed. Build for the CRC. And that's it. This one's short. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Let me know your thoughts. Bye bye.